Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about my OCD recovery journey. Now, I did a post just now talking about that, and I thought I've never really gone into detail that sort of eureka moment, that moment where everything really changed for me. Okay, so I thought I'm definitely going to do that today. I want to talk about specifically when it all started to change and what that felt like, so you can understand where that was on the where that sort of how that relates to your own journey and so on. Because often, I'm focusing so much on what we need to do to get better and all the different things, and don't focus enough on the actual realization in my head. So I'd had OCD for over a decade, okay? Every thought, everything latched on, chronic guilt, chronic anxiety for years and years and years. And it had been like that and it hadn't released, okay? So it was very, very much stuck on like that, 24/7 it feels like, in the background. In some way it's sort of like locked on, hooked in the background. All right, a lot of the time you'll find you're going along and you're not anxious. No, you're not like chronically anxious in that moment, but you've still got it somewhere in the background, or some kind of chronic guilt or some kind of intrusive thought still there. Now, I had a false memory. Most of mine were false memory, real events. So real things that happened, variations where I couldn't tell 100% if that is exactly what happened or if it wasn't. And it locked to that, and it was locked in the background. And I thought I'd done something really bad when I was young, but I couldn't tell 100%. So it was like real event, false memory, and it wouldn't release. Now, in my OCD recovery journey, I read every book I could find on OCD. I went to centres around the world. I was in forums for years. I spent years and years doing everything to get better. And what I realised a long time ago, which is still the way it is today, hence me doing what I do for work all the time, is that there's been a big misconception in OCD in the community, in the way people work towards recovery since the beginning, because it's been misunderstood. Now, what is that? Well, it's something that I talk about on here all the time, and that is thoughts are thoughts. Basically, what that is unless you have OCD, it's very easy to think you can just leave thoughts there and not do anything with them. And they can sort of be left there, change your relationship with the thoughts and get better. Now, that's a key part of the journey, but it's not going to do it. It's not going to be the full release, because what do you do for people who have a real event, like they do get HIV, or they do lose a baby, or they do fall out with their family, or they do whatever? What are you going to do? You have to get under it using what Albert Ellis, the founder of CBT, laid out: unconditional self and life acceptance, and showing how we authorize and catastrophize our thinking. Okay, just spilt water all down me from drinking that glass of water too quickly before this live, and that is vital. Okay, so this is very important to learn thoughts are thoughts to change our relationship with OCD. That is very, very important. Okay, so we do need to know that. We do need to be aware of that. All right, that is very important. We need to be aware of that. Changing our relationship, key. But without an understanding and believing it on some level underneath that things aren't as terrifying as we can imagine them to be in our head in that moment when we see things irrationally, we do get thrown around on this roller coaster of emotions by OCD. If you didn't have OCD, you wouldn't see this. I knew this from my own personal view years ago, because it wouldn't release. The chronic guilt wouldn't go with leaving thoughts there. It was always subtly there. It wouldn't fully go. Now, that, when I got under it, gave that real freedom. That's what I talk about in that post today. It gave that real freedom where you feel, no, that can't get under there. It's very, very much at peace. Now, that is not to say for a lot of people, they can just go about it with leaving it be, changing their relationship with thoughts. Many can. But when it's really severely locked on in that chronic format, it's very difficult to do that without getting under it really at the core like that. I've been saying this for years, and this is what I do in all my work. And I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people and got them better, and have seen those journeys. And you've only got to look at stories like the likes of Oliver Vessies, who's good, knowledgeable guy on OCD who I worked with, who'd been in specialist centres in the States for OCD, couldn't recover, spent years doing exposures, couldn't recover, got under it at the core there with those irrational beliefs, that unconditional self-acceptance. And you've seen the transformation with him. If you see him in the work he does in the groups, the Facebook groups and at the talks, you can see how it does. And so many like that, because it doesn't, it wouldn't. It would have released for me if I'd done that. I left it for years. I did meditation. I did yoga. I didn't want to get rid of it. I wore it like an uncomfortable coat, like Claire Weeks says. Veterans of Claire Weeks will always say that Claire Weeks is all that's needed. It's not all that's needed. You need to get under it more with OCD. Claire Weeks is an important part, but it won't with OCD usually get under it. Now, let me explain the difference. When I'd spent it was probably about 16 months, I'd been working on exposures, I'd been working on my irrational beliefs, I'd been getting under it, really working on it. It all came to a point where I got to a day, I was sitting in the bath, bear in mind there'd been a long build up to this, and I'd been working on my thinking, my philosophies and so on. And I was lying in the bath and I realised in that moment, do you know what? Even if my thing came true, it was real in reality. I am not scared anymore. I can see that's an illusion. I can see it's my irrational beliefs that are fueling that. And it released. It let go. It completely let go. And I could see in that moment that even if I'd done that thing in the past, that thing that I thought was so terrible that I would be hated for and everything, that I could be at peace with that. I could be at peace with that, absolutely. And when I was lying in that bath, I completely felt that relaxation. I felt that calm. And I felt it was like a factory reset switch had been hit in my head and taken me back to when I didn't suffer from chronic OCD. And in that moment, I was sitting there and I felt complete peace. And it was like I'd woken out of a coma. I thought to myself, very few people will have ever achieved this because of the amount of work that needed to be done. That doesn't mean people can't be down to like 10, 20% anxiety or anxiety that's bobbing up and from, but I was at a position where I realised that there would be no chronic anxiety and chronic guilt because the beliefs had changed. And nothing that was coming along, I had control of that, not in an unhealthy way, but I had the choice, like Albert Ellis's book, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable. I was stubbornly refusing to make myself miserable. Now, at that point, I realised exactly what Dr. Albert Ellis had been talking about. I saw how that applied. I saw the difficulty that he had in trying to get people better because of the amount of work that needed to be done. And because I'd done it for myself and experienced it, I realised and I could see through my eyes what the other side was like. Now, I know this very clearly today, having worked with patients that he was working with before he passed away, and having worked with them and helped them with their OCD and seeing the struggle. But it's very difficult, to get people to change their thinking or change their irrational beliefs. They've had them for a very long time, locked on for a long period. They're very much locked up in that. And so to change that needs exposures, it needs disputing, and it takes work. It takes hard work. It wasn't an easy journey. And that's why so few people get to that point where they're at complete peace. There's different levels of recovery. There's sort of recovery where it bobs up and down, sort of maybe on and off. Some people get to that 10, 20% anxiety still being there. But then there's that where you've got just, it's sort of really, it doesn't bother you at all. It's not even there. The cycle doesn't even spark. That is completely different. And I really saw that. I could see that Albert Ellis, what he was saying made complete sense. I could see exactly how it would work, but getting it to achieve it and internally embody it was very difficult. But when I got to that position and I realised that, I got out of that bath and I didn't really, that day, I think I was on a holiday. And so I walked from my house across to the Natural History Museum in London. And I walked around it. I literally felt like I'd just come out of a coma. I was like re-experiencing everything because I'd been sort of trapped behind this sort of internal veil, locked up in this anxiety for so long. That when I started walking around, I was like, God, this is what it really feels like to be free again. It was a very, very overwhelming sensation at first because I thought, it was so new to me. I'd got this, it was almost like having experienced the Stockholm syndrome where I'd been so stuck with the captor for so long that I'd grown familiar with being with them, the captor being OCD and the anxiety and feeling protected in that cycle, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to not be anxious and to not be on guard. And so I had to get used to that. And, from that moment, I realised I'm going to have to now work to get people better from OCD, because if I don't do this, people aren't going to notice this. This isn't going to come to light, because unless they've had OCD, done the work to this extent, found that relief, and then that is time and time again done with each person, I knew that it wouldn't change, because I just saw countless people in forums like, hi, I'm going to therapist, hi, I'm doing thoughts to thoughts, hi, I'm changing my things, I'm reading this book, I've changed my relationship, I've tried to relabel it, but it won't really go. And they were never fully better. They were sort of like functioning well, but never fully better. And I just realized that is what has got to be obtained. And that is not known. And that is not... people don't realize that. Albert Ellis realized it with obviously the work he was doing, but hadn't put it into sort of real practice with OCD in a big way. So I knew that that's where it had to carry on from. I also knew that Albert Ellis had sort of come about through the likes of Greek and Roman philosophy that sort of paved the way. So it was all from the Stoicism and so on that had created that environment for that all to flourish and go that way. And that was very much the case with then all of it sort of came together, being able to change our relationship with the thoughts. I was able to do that and change my relationship and create that sort of internal distance with the thoughts. Once I was at that level of acceptance, I could see it for what it is, because I wasn't sort of terrified there was something that had been done wrong so bad that I couldn't be forgiven for, where chronic guilt, sort of like where you're playing judge and executioner in your head, is attacking you 24/7. And that's what it was like, living like that every day. So that is very, very much the position that I was in for years. And that was the release period. And then came the transition and so on into that, and that being my life and so on and so on. The book, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable, absolutely is that. Whether you have a cancer, whether you have a disease, whether you lose your mum and dad, whether you are bankrupted, whether you are going to jail, none of it makes you as miserable as you would imagine. It's your beliefs that are making it miserable. When you really realize that, feel that and see that, then nothing can get you to that extent. Nothing. And that's what gets people better from everything. PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, getting into that core to show them, hey, when you were scared at that thing at that time, in that period, it was only because of that interpretation of that event that you held as in an irrational format, that you believed it, that created that whole sort of allergic internal reaction, fueling that whole sort of anxiety web inside you that binds you. Okay? So that is it. When that all went and was no longer there, I was able to clearly see, that is how I am underneath it. Because we get so used to it. We become, there's so much stuff online like, oh yeah, I'm functioning, but never real recovery. I wanted everything like to highlight that. That's what this whole, everything I do and the organization I run is everything's to do with recovery. It's for getting recovered. That is to a place where you can't really tell you've got OCD. Now, what do I mean by that? OCD has most likely got a biological part. It's most likely got a biological factor. So you will notice it try and cue itself up at times. Rarely, not so often. Intrusiveness to thoughts have lost all intrusiveness. You can't even tell the difference between if you had them or you didn't, more or less, because it's just like normal thoughts. There's no intrusiveness. But you're always going to have very subtle. I'm talking like maybe every few weeks you'll just notice it. Maybe you go to turn an oven off and it sort of goes, what happens if you burn down the house? Just a little 1 second coming in. But that's not like the chronic format. When you're in that chronic format, it's locked, binding you the whole time and it doesn't release. That is the difference. That's what you want under, so that you are feeling internal peace 99.9% of the time. You notice it queue up now and again, ready to try and hook. But apart from that, it's not there. It is not just functioning with it. You hear people say, I'm in recovery, but I had 10 panic attacks a day. That's not recovery. Recovery is no chronic guilt, no chronic anxiety, and intrusive thoughts have lost their intrusiveness. That is what recovery is. Nothing else but that. You've got people that are 10 to 20% sort of anxiety. They've come from where they were in a terrible way. That's incredible. They're on the recovery journey. They're miles from where they were, but that is not recovery. Recovery, by definition, has to be absence of chronic anxiety and chronic guilt. I think that covers my sort of brief talk on my journey. I'm going to be covering different sections on the journey on these Instagram lives as I go along, so that I can cover different sections, because I think it's very important that this gets highlighted, because I know how alone it feels when you're on that journey, because I was alone on that journey for so long. So I remember it. I can remember exactly what it feels like, where it's like a war in your head, a battle. Every single day you get up, you got a war in your head, and then it's going on and on and on and on till you learn to see and change your relationship, get under your fears, change your reaction to things, become less scared of things in life in general. That whole combination is what brings it down. I think that covers most of the things I wanted to talk about today on here. I will be doing a question and answers Instagram live soon, where you can ask all your questions as usual, all about the OCD journey and so on. Don't give up hope. You're living at a great time. We're not living in the Middle Ages where no one even knew what OCD was. That would have been hell then, really would. Now we live at a time you can get better. Got the resources. There's tons of free resources on this page. YouTube channel, so many videos we've got on there. The Facebook group, the social media pages like this Instagram. There's 2,500 posts. We put so much time into doing those. You can scroll through those. You can learn so much about OCD. You can improve your knowledge of it. There is the content there available. So yeah, do it, guys. You can do it, and you're never alone. It takes longer than you want. You can't sprint a marathon. It's it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You've got to roll with it. You'll get there. Take it one day at a time. There's loads of people on this journey with you, and wherever you are in the world, you're in a position where there's probably someone just around the corner going through it, but you just don't know they're there. When you start joining these groups and you start meeting other people with OCD, you realise that you're not alone. People in your countries, people just around the corner. It is very, very common. It's just been unknown for so long. So that's what we're doing. We're bringing it out the dark. We're putting it on the map. It's time it gets properly put on the map. So that is what we're doing. Guys, I will see you on the next Instagram Live. Take it easy. Bye.